Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, and it's tournament time, baby! The first webcam tournament of the Daybreak metagame is upon us. It's happening this weekend, which you can of course watch live on all these places. All these is just put up the places where you can watch it. But for many of you, especially those who found Elestrals through this channel in particular, I know you are probably at a bit of a loss. Unlike Yu-Gi-Oh, it's not like there's an existing knowledge pool from which to pull, so it can be really difficult to understand what you should be playing, what you should be looking out for, and most importantly, the players you should be really scared of. So today I am going to give you a tournament primer, everything you need to succeed in this upcoming weekend's Daybreak tournament. We're going to begin with a discussion of the decks, move on to a discussion of individual cards you should be wary of, and then we'll talk a little bit about the people who are playing. Now, first and foremost, I want to offer a bit of a disclaimer. What I tell you is good today is not necessarily going to be good for the remainder of the format. People thought Morfrost was going to be powerful first week of Frostfall, and if the dueling tier lists produced by the Elestrals and the Caster's Corner are anything to go off of, there's a lot of disagreement about what's actually good. At present, though, I think there are a number of conclusions we can draw, at least for the early parts of the metagame, but just like how someone would be unprepared for the first Frostfall tournament if they came without a game plan against Morfrost, even though the deck ended up being pretty bad, I'm going to walk you through what I think is going to be immediately powerful. Let's get into the decks. First up, unsurprisingly, is 5s. I think you are going to see a lot of 5s this event. It's extremely easy to build, it's almost entirely comprised of staples, and importantly, it's very simple to play. Oh, you're attacking with a guy? Let me check my back row, and we're good. There's not a lot of opportunities for outplays, there's not a lot of opportunities to next level your opponent, and therefore it's going to be played a lot by people who are not confident with their individual play. If you are a new player, I would really encourage you to check out this deck. Being green to a card game is nothing to be ashamed of. Just like how in Yu-Gi-Oh, if players feel like they are at a knowledge deficit relative to other people playing the format, they might gravitate toward decks that are playing cards like Dimension Shifter, so here should you be unashamedly casting Specteris. I also think 5s is particularly well positioned into a metagame that is pretty unknown. It is the most adaptable of any of the decks we're going to talk about today. And most importantly, as the side deck has changed from 12 to 15 cards, it's the deck with the most individual slots to move in and out. You have nothing resembling a game plan you absolutely must keep in. Next up is Water Nexus. Water Nexus and its associates have had a ton of success throughout Elestral's history. In Daybreak, however, they finally took this deck to the next level. No longer is the win con of this strategy win game 3 in time, they now have a guy that does it for them. Kerberos is a new Elestral and it is extremely powerful. What's more, enabling this powerful Elestral only requires you to play a card the deck would be playing anyway in Eddy, and one kind of mid spell in Rock and a Hard Place. Even if you don't want to go all the way in on Rock, just putting extra spirits on Eddy and Raw Ascending is still extremely powerful. And make no mistake, this deck will be extremely popular because Kerberos is also the box topper promo. A lot of people are going to have access to this deck, and so for individuals who want to play a deck with a coherent game plan, this is probably what they will gravitate towards. But it's not the only water deck I expect people to be playing. I also think there's going to be a ton of Chronodile. Now, I uploaded a list for Chronodile earlier this week, which will probably contribute at least a little to people considering it for this Daybreak tournament. But Chronodile's popularity is the result of a number of things. Firstly, it is the cover card of a starter deck. For a lot of people, this is how they got into Elestrals in the first place, and hearing that a card this powerful is found in the deck that they purchased on RIP is pretty alluring. Secondly, it also functions pretty well with Water Nexus. For individuals who are already familiar with that strategy, this can be a really excellent top end for people who don't want to consider Kerberos and its associated kind of bad card. And finally, there's just something nice about casting a 3-drop. They've been so infrequently playable over the course of Elestral's history that just casting 3 spirits onto one guy feels good. Water decks aside, let's talk about some decks and other elements that I think are going to be extremely powerful, starting with Earth Nexus. Doesn't take a genius to figure out that the deck that just took down an event is going to show up at another event. Despite the fact that Earth Nexus didn't get a ton from Daybreak, Bean Soldier TV proved that the deck already had a pretty good 5s matchup, and into a field full of it, it looks pretty good. Add to that the first even remotely competent receive Elestral in Mudlet, and you've got a stew cooking. Speaking of cooking, Solar. So a lot of people have been really deep in the tank with this strategy, and it's not hard to see why. This archetype has some of the most individually powerful cards in Elestral's history, but at present there's no correct Solar build. That said, I know a lot of individuals who are trying to arrive at it and feel like they have found a list they expect to be really, really good. Trish put this in S tier. Like, he has to know something we don't. Even if the deck is only okay, I think you're going to see a lot of it in this tournament because it's new. People want to try out the cool new toys, and Solar is really cool. In terms of individual cards, well, there have been a lot of changes. Firstly, in the back row, you are going to have to be really cognizant of Dense Fog, especially in boarded games. While there's a couple of decks that can almost entirely ignore this card, there's a lot that can't. Case in point, any of these Nexus decks are going to have a really hard time with their linked effects, both halves of which need to resolve to actually get something going. Suppression is incredibly powerful into the ton of Elestrals that change their own attack stat, and importantly, play a very interesting role in decks that are already natively playing Specteris. Also in the back row, Argo. Argo's going to take the cake as the scariest thing your opponent can just have in the back row. It is a little telegraphed. Usually they will set up a really advantageous attack for you before setting an Argo, but you are going to have to proc it sometime. Now, I don't think Argo is going to be a mandatory inclusion in every single deck. It's really expensive, but make no mistake, a significant amount of decks, including the Nexus ones, can really profit off of its use. And getting blown out by this card is a huge deal. Outside of Poke the Bear, this is the closest we have to Sakuretsu armor. New Lith PogChamp, New Lith PogChamp. Arcolith is a card with just about as easy a summoning condition as Lavalith, and a really crazy payoff. In any deck that's splashing a sufficient number of Thunder Spirits, it can get to 5 really quickly. Since you're going to have Elestrals in attack position in the first place in order for your opponent to cast it profitably, you could be taking 4 almost guaranteed. Don't get got by this guy on the last turn of the game. And finally, Bloom. Bloom is a card that only really works in decks that are playing a bunch of the Earth Nexus cards, but that could be a lot of them. Do not get yourself in a position where you could theoretically be blown up by Viserys or Mudlet using this card. As a final preparatory measure, let's talk a little bit about the players you should be horrified of. The Knots. Any one of the Elestronauts has the possibility of being a player killer, be it Caleb or Swolax or Distant Coder or, of course, Bean Soldier TV. But at present, the scariest guy in the room is definitely Josh. Hopping off of an Elestriad win, followed by a webcam tournament win, including a webcam tournament where he went undefeated in Swiss and then had to leave for a prior engagement. This guy's kind of untouchable right now. Of course, that untouchability was specific to the Frostfall meta. It's very possible that he doesn't have what it takes when it comes to Daybreak, but I kind of doubt it. I don't want to waste all my glaze on Josh specifically, though. Remember, there was a significant amount of time when Distant Coder had won literally every paper event ever held. Swole had an event win during the extremely skill-testing Thunder Nexus format, and Caleb won an outround with Krakatuga. I mean, that's insane. Next up is Jayak. Fresh off of a webcam tournament runner-up and now an entrant in the 3rd season of the Elestriad, Jayak has had, like, an insane run the last couple of months. If they play this weekend, I would expect them to be a person to watch, if not fear. They're currently the individual with the 3rd highest elo on the entire planet as well, so do with that information what you will. Another individual who's been on a crazy run recently is Spicy Sausage. This player has been killing it on the app, racking up multiple tournament victories. And finally, you should be suspicious of anyone who has a burgeoning locals scene. While a lot of the individuals I mentioned, and a ton more I'm not going to get to in this video, have cut their teeth on the Elestrals webcam and application scene, organized play has started, and a lot of people have put in a ton of really rewarding hours with playgroups from their area. The greatest Elestrals player on the planet may have just joined the community a couple of weeks ago, and if they're jamming enough in paper with people around them, who knows what they might be capable of. So that's the quick and dirty of what you can expect this weekend. I'll definitely be playing. I don't know what I'm going to be playing yet, and I hope, especially if you're new, that I'll see you there.